In the early 1950s, I was a young idealistic ex-veteran, and I could see my world crumbling around us. And I could see the government taking over the schools, and, well, things just looked terrible. So I went to work for an organization in Virginia called the Defenders of State Sovereignty and Individual Liberties. How's that for a title? The job was to keep the government from taking over the schools. All the senators belonged to it, the congressmen, the governor, members of the House of Delegates, the Senate, and, oh, Lord, thousands and thousands and thousands of Virginians belonged to that group. And my job was organizer. And I traveled over the state of Virginia, giving talks, trying to get the people together to organize. Trying to get Virginians to organize about anything is a difficult thing. I went by time after time after time and found that the Virginians didn't know who they were. I think they thought they grew to the ground in Virginia. You know, they'd always been there, and that's the way it was. So I had to tell the old story of where we came from, the history of our race. And I said it so many times that I wrote a little booklet called Our Nordic Race, a history of our race. Now, at that time, I didn't know we weren't like other people. I knew that the blacks had 20 or 30 books on their race. Orientals had 10, 15. You go to any bookstore, Jews had 50 or 100. Lord. But we didn't have a single one. All the old books had gone into print. So I said, oh, Dick Hoskins, it's going to be your job to write the history of the white race. So I did. I didn't know that the Bible was our history book. And we don't need any other history book. However, if you can't read the Bible in one day, you might want to get Our Nordic Race. I think you can handle that in about an hour and a half. Our people today. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The law, statutes, and judgment. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. Only we understand what those words mean. In the beginning, God created man, Adam. We look up in Strong's Concordance the word Adam, man, to blush red. In the beginning, God created he that blushes red. I am in you, and you are in me. Only we know what that means. Now, I've got a German Shepherd story. I tried to explain to the youngsters. Youngsters don't, sometimes they pick up real fast. Sometimes you've got to sort of explain things to them. Now, I use a German Shepherd story. I'm a dog nut. In the service, I got called up in 1961 during the Berlin crisis into the 100th Airborne Division. And I worked the dog at night. And that was fun. I had a dog named Thor. Now, how you like that for a name? That dog was 110 pounds. Never made a sound. Was quiet, just as quiet at night, and just as alert. That dog could see at night, and we worked together just like this as a team. Now, I would tell Thor, come. And Thor came. I would say, Thor, sit. Thor would sit. I would say, go, and he would go. And I would say, down. I didn't have to say it. All I had to do was use hand signals. I would do this, and he would go. I would do this, and he went this way. I would go this, and he would go further. And I'd say, down, and he would go down. And when the person that we were hunting would come between us, I would say, and he would come from that side, and I would come from this side, and we'd have our quarry just like that, and that person didn't stand a chance. That dog did exactly what I told him to do. And why? Why not? For 1,000 generations, every German shepherd in that dog's ancestry who obeyed lived. And all the German shepherds in that dog's ancestry that disobeyed was not allowed to breathe, or he was killed. And this dog, Thor, was the result of 1,000 generations of obedient German shepherds. Now, our people are obedient. And why are they obedient? It's because we have certain laws that were placed in our heart when God created Adam. Man, I will put my laws in your hearts, and you will be my people, and I will be your God. And what are the laws? No killing, no rape, no kidnapping, no adultery. These are the laws. And what happens to our people for 1,000 generations who committed murder, rape, adultery, kidnapping? We've killed them, right? We are the result of 1,000 generations of those who have obeyed the law. We are a product of the law. The law is in us, and we are in the law. I am in you, and you are in me. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And he created man, and he put the law in his heart, and we are his people. Other races, this is not so. In Africa, to become a chief, you kill many people. If you kill many people, you're elected chief. And then you have many wives, and you have many children. If you're a good thief and can steal many cattle, then you can buy many wives, and then can have many children. Africans are the result of 1,000 generations of murderers and thieves. Not that they're not delightful, enjoyable. I like black. I like to be around them, frankly, on an individual basis, more than I do most whites. Most whites are reserved, standoffish. Sometimes I think they're kind of snooty. Blacks, you know, they make you feel like $1 million. But they'll kill you, and they'll rob you blind. They are lawless. And if you don't believe it, go in and look in the jails in New York City, Chicago, Lynchburg, Virginia. This town, they're full of blacks. That's the way it should be. They've violated our law. In the West, we have the jails full of Indians. But to be a chief, you have to kill many, many other people. You have to steal many horses to have wives. If you kill many people and steal many horses, you have many wives and many children. And the Indians are a result of 1,000 generations of thieves and murderers. And you go into the jails of the West, and they're full of Indians, as you would expect it. Not that many Indians are not admirable people. They certainly are. They have done feats that, I mean, there's something to hold up and to emulate, actually. But they are very lawless people. The Jews go by the law, but they go by interpretations of the law. And their interpretations of the law is not the law we go by. For instance, they say thou shalt not kill. However, the Talmud, which they go by, states that if somebody gets in a cold room and you lock the door on them and they die of cold or exposure, now you did not kill that person. It was the cold that killed them. Now that's the logic, and it makes it extremely difficult to go by. They are very lawless people. When you have Jews around, they're lawless people. Delightful, entertaining, charming, lawless. Our Nordic race today, in Scotland, the home of John Knox, where Protestantism in our country really started, where the land was divided and everyone had his share. You could drive for 50 miles and not see a person anywhere. The beautiful green lands of Scotland, the rolling hills, the magnificent pastures, and you can look over there and you can see the outlines of foundations with no houses. And then you look, the cobblestone streets leading nowhere. The villages all grown up with grass and sheep growing there. The villages are gone, the people are gone. Where are the people? They have been moved to town. They no longer have their land. They're stockpiled and walk up cold water flats, many of them. These are the free Scots. These are our kinsmen. This is Scotland today. I arrived in, I can't even think of the name of the town, when a nationalist party meeting was going on. And all of these big, brawny Scots were walking around in their kilts, and they had dirks in their stockings, and they had their plaids on, and they dared you to say something about their kilts. And I wasn't about to. I'll tell you, I sort of like that, really. You know, my mother's people come from that part of the country. And I sat down and talked to some of their leaders. And they are very much aware of the situation. What they do in Scotland is, if a person doesn't live on the land, and a few people own many thousands of acres in Scotland, the houses have a bad way of just catching fire. And that's what's being done in Scotland today. The movement is underway in Scotland the same as it is in the United States. In the Scottish cities in the north, you can see blacks everywhere, in all the cities of England and Scotland. And you can see Indians from India and Orientals from Hong Kong, all over England. Things in England, Scotland, and Ireland have changed much in the last 20 years. In Scandinavia and Oslo and places like that, you'll see Orientals and Turks. You'll see all sorts of people. And the crime rate is rushing up. And the taxation is getting grindingly heavy. Germany, our kinsmen, our Saxon kinsmen in Germany, live in a land that's overflowing with Turks and blacks and Orientals. In South Africa, they complain to me about the newspapers. They don't understand in South Africa how the newspapers could be so violently anti-South African. And they have blacks and Orientals, and they're being overwhelmed by lies and misdirection and bad government. In Australia, the black boys are being given entire stretches of land cleared, settled by whites. They're being given all sorts of privileges at the whites' expense. Orientals are pouring into Australia. We have even Turks. They have 24, 25 separate races going into Australia now. New Zealand. They send me copies of newspapers from New Zealand. And the warlike Maoris, the bloodthirsty Maoris, are now reorganizing. They're gathering together. They are arming machine guns, mortars. Ships come in with these things. And the white people in New Zealand are looking apprehensively over their shoulder at these Maoris, who are encouraged by their government, given everything by the government at the expense of the white people. And you know the situation in America, so there's no need to talk about that. This is the state of our Nordic race today. We are under assault. Our enemies are pouring in on us. What's God's plan? How does all of this fit? Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is God's plan. I can remember going down to Virginia Beach. I got a daughter who lives down there. And I was driving south of Petersburg. And I looked up there, I looked across, and I saw a cottage. One of the type of cottages we used to have a lot of. Had 3 dormers in front, you know. Just a story and a half. Just a cottage. But it was old. Had those little narrow dormers up at the top. It was old. And it had a cemetery, good-sized cemetery. So I said, goodness gracious, I'm going to have to see that place, because I thought I'd seen all the old places around there. So I stopped the car, turned around, and drove the driveway. Nobody was there. Well, I'm sorry, I tried to, you know. So I went out to the cemetery. Now, do you know those graves went back into the 1600s? I counted them. Best I figured, they had 8 or 9 generations buried in that cemetery. And the cottage was a cottage that was shaped like it was unusual. It had started out just as a cottage. You know, you go in the hall, and there's a room on the right and a room on the left. You go up the steps, and there's a room on the right and a room on the left. And at the very head of the steps, there'd be a little nursery. You go down the basement, and there's a room on the right and a room on the left, see? It's one of those English basements, got those windows you can look at it. That's the way all the old houses in Virginia are built. Room on the right, room on the left. Go upstairs, room on the right, room on the left. In the basement, room on the right, room on the left. You always, all of them built the same way. Now, if you wanted to expand, you had 2 ways to do it. You could either make it a T-shape, you build an addition on it. Let's say you lived in there, your family got big and got rich, you know, because that's what happens. Wealth accumulates over a period of time. And you turned it into a T-shaped building or an L-shaped building. And that's how it grows in Virginia. After another generation, they might get more money, the family might get bigger, you need a bigger house, you put another wing on it. And then it might turn into a U-shaped building or a H-shaped building. Now, the beauty of that is that when you come along, it's your time to inherit from your daddy. You don't have to build a building. You can go do your thing. Now, I don't know what your thing is. It might be metalworking, or it might be chemistry, it might be writing, it might be raising cattle, or it might be improving a new breed of a new strain of wheat, corn, or something like that. But whatever your calling is, you can do it because you already got the house built, and you don't have to spend half of your lifetime paying for a house. It's already built. Good house. Lasted all those generations. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Now, that was that house. And the guy, in order to keep it, I knew what he was doing. He was working over in Petersburg. Because you can't make a living on the land anymore. There's a reason for that, and I got it in War Cycle Sea Cycle. I might as well tell you why you can't live on the land right. Hey, do we have any farmers here still there? Let's see in the hands if we have any farmers. Okay, we got 3 or 4. All of our daddies owned land. My granddaddy owned 10,000 acres down in Tidewater. It's now owned by Chesapeake Corporation. Big land companies have got it all. Somebody else has got all that land. Same way, all of this has happened before. I cover that in Vigilantes. There's a reason for all this thing. Now, let me tell you what they did. We have this thing called usury. Now, it used to be that nobody knew exactly what usury is, or was, or is. But they know now. Everybody knows what usury is. And what the New York banks did was this. They lent money down in South America, payable in dollars. Well, down there in South America, they've got lumber, they got gold, they got copper, they got Oh, manufacturing plant, they got all sorts of things, but they don't grow dollars down there. And they've got to come up with dollars, or else the banks up there in New York are going to foreclose on them and take everything they've got. So they're desperate to get dollars. The one thing they do have is food. Now, they can grow food down there. Can't grow it as well as we can, but they got food. Now, this is what happens. Remember, they're desperate. They got to get the money if they're going to keep the banks from foreclosing. The president of the country will buy every bit of food produced, and he'll sell it in the United States at 75 cents on the dollar or 50 cents on the dollar. Now, our farmers are good, and they, on an equal basis, they can outproduce anybody in the world, but nobody can make a living if they're being undersold at 50 cents on the dollar. Down there in Argentina, they pay the farmers in Argentinian money and sell it to America and get dollars to pay the New York banks. Our farmers go out of business because they can't compete. Our farmers shut down, and they sell more and more food into America. They're now selling more than 50% of the food into America for this reason. And it's caused, why? Because our farmers are so bad? No, it's because of the New York banks. And this thing is going to continue on until everyone has lost their land. But that's not the way it should be. Let's see how it should be. Pete Fauntleroy down in Alta Vista. I stopped by to see him. He's one of my customers. I stopped by to see him one day. He lives in an old house down there. The old house that, have any of y'all ever heard of the term lynching? Hey, any of y'all know where it comes from? Okay, we got one person who knows where it comes from. Lynchburg was built by John Lynch. And his brother was down there in Alta Vista. And his brother worked in the court. Now, I'm talking about the British court. And when we got in the war with England, all the judges went back to England, all the preachers went back to England. Well, they had to have some sort of law, and this Lynch fella, the brother of John Lynch down there, he had worked in the court a long time. He knew an awful lot about law. So they made him a judge, Judge Lynch. And he held court out in his front yard underneath the tree that they called the lynch tree. And if you want to get justice, you took your court case down to Judge Lynch and got lynched. Now, he never hanged a man, never did, see? But that's the term of lynch law. It's the only law we had in that part of Virginia for years and years and years. I thought you could sort of appreciate that. I don't know how I got on that. Please excuse me. Oh, yeah, Pete Fauntleroy, he owned the tree. He owned the land. It was his, the old man Lynch, Charles Lynch, that was his house that he lived in. Charles Lynch was Pete Fauntleroy's great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy. That's what it was. We have to get things straight here. But he did have 6, 7, or 8 generations buried out there in the yard. And he still lived in that house. And that's the way it should be. Roseland, the home of the Hunleys down in Tidewater. My great-great-grandmother came out of Roseland. There are 11 generations buried there. And it's still in the same family. It's a cottage. It's got 3 dormers. It's got a room on the right, a room on the left. Go down the basement, there's a room on the right, a room on the left. Go up in the upstairs, a room on the right, a room on the left, and nursery headed stairs. And it's been that way for almost 9 generations. The house was built in the late 1600s. It's an old house. And that's the way it should be. Now, why should it be that way? Well, let's look. God said, now, before you go into the, when you go into the promised land, now, this is what I want you to do. The land is to be divided for an inheritance. To many thou shalt give the more, to few thou shalt give the less. The land shall be divided by lot. According to their fathers shall they inherit. That's Numbers 26, 53, 55. Furthermore, the land is never to be sold ever. The land is not to be sold forever. The land is mine. Whose land is it? It's God's. Now, that land out there that belonged to your daddies and your granddaddies and great-granddaddies, it wasn't theirs. They held it in trust. And where is it now? Somebody else has got it. So what sort of steward was your daddy and granddaddy and great-granddaddy? And mine? They were lousy stewards, right? The land is not to be taxed. We are not to be taxed. Why? Of whom do the... Now, this is Jesus Christ talking. Listen. Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or of strangers? Peter said unto him, of strangers. Then are the children free. That's Matthew 17, 25, 26. You cannot own land if you pay taxes on it. Why? Because if you miss a tax payment, what do they do with the land? They take it. If they take it, the land's gone, right? And it's not to be sold forever. So therefore, the tax on the land is illegal because it requires the land to pass over the family, and that's illegal. It can't be done. Every time you see a sale of a farm taking place, you're watching something that's against God's law. It's an illegal act. Okay, let's go on a little bit further. Christians, now listen, we've got a bunch of churches around who have tax exemption, and they're given tax exemption to suppress the law. Now, you can go to church alone. Now, I'm not a preacher, see, but I am a preacher because the scripture said each of us is a priest and a king. And the law was placed in our hearts equally. Now, you know all these fool things before I have opened my mouth, see? All I'm doing is putting in words what you already know. Notwithstanding, now listen to how they can twist things. But lest we should offend them, now Jesus was a sly one when it came to talking. You really got to read it twice, you know? Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, now that was for the benefit of the listeners, go to the sea. Now, what is the sea? Peoples, right? We know that from Revelation. Stakes right out. The sea is peoples. Okay, go to the sea, peoples, and cast in a hook. What's a hook? What's the thing that grabs you? The word. And take up the fish, the believer. Now, what's the sign of the believer? What's the sign of the Christian? The fish, right? And take up the fish, the believer, that first cometh up. And when you have opened his mouth, there shall find a piece of money, or a stater, or a thing of value. The Greek name is stater, which means something of value. Stater. When you open his mouth, you take something of value out of it. And what are you going to take out of a Christian's mouth that will be of value? The word, okay. That thing of value, take and give it to them for me and thee. Matthew 17, 27. And what does it say about stealing in the scriptures? Okay, 2 to 1, 4 to, or 5 to 1. Return. And the thief is to be punished. That is what is supposed to be done to Caesar. Then it goes on, that's Matthew 17, 27. And then it goes on to Matthew 22, 19 through 21. Show me the tribute money. And they brought him a penny. And he saith unto them, whose image and superscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. Then he said unto him, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And still, what's the penalty for thievery? Taxation is not allowed among our people. It's not allowed to tax our people. So, he is saying, go to the law for redress. Now, about this thing called the law. Now, listen very closely. This land that he has promised us, that is to be divided, and never to be sold, land that you can go. Our people are full of panic and desperation. They're dependent on someone else for their every dollar, for the bread to feed themselves and their children. They have no farm that they could go back to and put a plow in the ground and grow a crop to keep them starving. If their job plays out or they're fired, it is panic and desperation. And that's not the way it should be. God said we were kings and priests, and we were given this land never to be sold, to rule by God's law, so we'd always have a place to return to forever, our place, and we were to rule it according to God's law. And we would always be safe there and never be taxed there. And the Lord thy God will make thee plenteous. You obey God's law, the Lord thy God will make thee plenteous in every work of thine hand, in the fruit of thy body, and in the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of the land, for good. And the Lord will again rejoice over thee for good, as he rejoiced over thy father. It shall hearken unto the voice, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, and if thou turn unto the Lord thy God with all thine heart, for this commandment which I command thee this day is not hidden from thee. You don't have to go into a box and pull it out, or pull back a curtain, or listen to some speaker from Virginia to stand up on a stand and say it. But the word is very nigh unto thee, and in thy mouth, that thou mayest do it, and in thy heart. That's what the scripture says in Deuteronomy 39. It's not something he's going to do in the future. It is something that was done long, long ago in the very beginning. Now, what are these laws? They're simple ones. First, love God. What is God? God is the Word. The Word made flesh, who dwelt among us. The personification of the law itself. 2, no idols, no substitutes. 3, don't take his name in vain. Don't take his name, which is the Word, and say the Word means something that it doesn't mean. Don't take it in vain. Don't say it's all right when it's all wrong. Don't take his name in vain. The Sabbath. Keep it. I didn't understand that Sabbath, but I always tried the best I could to keep it, the best I could. But I got with a bunch of engineers, and they explained it to me. They didn't know much about God's law, at least in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they had it in their heart, and they say, when things slow down on the Sabbath, and people really rest on the Sabbath, then on the next day they can produce half again as much work. If they don't slow down on the Sabbath, if they don't rest on the Sabbath, they can't do it. Now Napoleon, you know, he gave us the metric system, everything in 10. And the story I heard was that he tried to make a week of 10 days, to make that in the metric system too. But the horses broke down, and the people broke down, and the country went to the dogs, so he had to return to the seventh day. There is something about the seventh day that on the seventh day, rest. And if you rest, then you will produce better on the next day. That's 4. 5, honor thy mother and father. 6, murder. 7, adultery or adulteration. You're not to adulterate any contract, marriage contracts, business contracts, any type of contracts. You're not to adulterate them. Steal, number 8. 9, false witness. 10, covet. Don't covet something somebody else has got. It was meant for you to have it, you'd have it. Leave his wife alone, leave his car alone, leave his stuff alone. You keep on your side of the fence. Don't covet. Because to covet is the first step in doing the rest of those things. Now, there are 10. That's mighty simple. Just 10 rules to go by. But all of those were placed in our hearts, and we are a result of them, and we are part of them, and this is us, and we are it. Without this, we are dead. We are like everyone else. We have to have this to survive. All right, what happens if we don't obey? Well, there's punishments involved. Okay, let's see exactly what these punishments are. If we don't obey, but if you will not do all these commandments, I will do... Now, listen, this is the boss talking. If you will not do all these commandments, I also will do this unto you. Ye shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. It will be placed on a railroad car, a flat car, and it will be taken to a port, and it will be loaded up, and it will be shipped overseas, and your enemies will eat your food. 2, they that hate you shall rule over you. In Virginia, we have a very unusual governor. In many places, they even have strangers who are police. They have even taken strangers into the armed forces, and even they have, as the commander of the armies, a stranger. We have judges that are strangers. Now, this is promised. Don't be surprised. Don't hold it against the judges. Don't hold it against these people. This is God that's doing this. We're in the big leagues now. There is punishment involved. If you will not do my laws, ye shall flee when none pursueth you. Oh, I'm scared of getting mugged. Oh, I'm scared of the IRS coming after me. Oh, I'm scared of not having enough gasoline for my car. Oh, I'm scared of losing my job. Oh, I'm scared of this. Oh, I'm scared of that. Fear, 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 fear. Ye shall flee when none pursue you. It's promised. It has to come. Your land shall not yield her increase. Now, I have flown over some Midwestern land. Now, you might think this is a story. But this is a fact. After rain, and I thought I was flying over the biggest lake that you ever saw. The water out there went for miles and miles and miles. The ground, they had poured so much chemical on the land that had killed all the fishing worms, it had killed all the bacteria, it had killed everything in the ground. Everything was dead. The ground was baked so doggone hard, I'll bet you it would take a 150 horsepower tractor to drag a plow across it. And rain couldn't get through the doggone crust on the ground to get down the ground to do any good. I'll bet you most of that water evaporated and hardly any of it got into the ground underneath. And I'll bet you that's the trouble with a lot of those farms out there right now that complain for lack of water. It's not lack of water, it's the way they've been treating the land. And the land shall not yield her increase. That's the 5th thing that was promised. It's coming to pass. I will send wild beasts among you who shall rob you of your children. Now, Jesus called the Syrophoenician woman a dog. And why? Because she is just talking to make her mad or to insult her? No. He was describing who she is and what she'll do. A lawless person will eat anything and they'll breathe anything. And he called her a dog, and she accepted it. She knew what she was and what she'd do. At other times in the Bible, they would call them pigs, swine, meaning the same thing. People who would do anything, eat anything, and breathe anything. Or they call them beasts. They'll eat anything or breathe anything. And these beasts shall come and rob us of our children. And you can go a lot of these high schools and see the beasts walking hand in hand with your daughters. And you can go up and down the streets and walking hand in hand. And it is said here, I will send wild beasts among you, which will rob you of your children. Now, It's happening, just as it was written. I will make you few in number. In Canada, the birth rate is 1.55 per couple. It takes 2 children at least, or 2.2, I think it is, to keep a stable population, because certain numbers don't ever get married. But they don't even have 2 per family now. They have 1.55, and in Europe, in Germany, it's 1.5, 1.2, and in parts of England, it's less than that. So what's going to happen to the population? You shall be few in number. Promise. We shouldn't be surprised. Listen, if God says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. Now, we've got to read these things and say, now look, this is what's happening, and this is what's to be expected. Now we've got to figure out what to do about it. But let me finish this. I will bring a sword upon you. That hadn't happened yet. It happened to the Germans. It happened to the Southland. It happened to South Africa. But it hadn't happened to this country altogether yet, and it's coming. It's coming. It says it's coming. I will send a pestilence among you. Who would have heard of AIDS back there 5, 6, 7 years ago? Who would have dreamed it? I will send a pestilence. Man, I won't go into all the pestilences that we got, but boy, we got them? All different kinds, from herpes to TB that can't be healed to you name it. I will cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols. And I'm going to tell you what that means in just a minute. And I will make your cities waste. And you can drive through Philadelphia and New York and go block after block after block of empty, burned out, abandoned buildings. And every main street in the United States is half boarded up and half empty. Why? Because God said he would. And I will bring the land into desolation. The plantations, the farms that, as a boy, used to sprout all over the place. From Lynchburg to Lock Mountain, just 5 miles. You go up there, every field was plowed, the plow was everywhere. Everything was growing. Everything was full of crops and prosperity and growing. We didn't think it was very prosperous, but everybody had plenty to eat. They had a flock of children around, and all of them were being provided for. It's all vacant. There are trees growing up in those cornfields. I go right now on the mountain trails up there, the mountain roads. That back at just 150 years ago, used to have stagecoaches going by. They got trees by George big around as I am, growing right in the middle of the road. Cobblestone roads back in the mountains, deserted. Nobody knows where they are. I know where they are. The tops of the mountains that were farms right up on the very top level, and they had farms up on the very top. Every ridge line there had a farm on top of it. I remember that. Daddy was a doctor. He took me up there, all these hollows. We visited all these cabins up there and saw all the people. I go up there now. I can't go up a road. I got to walk up there. Back at 2, 3 miles up into the cabin. And there the cabin is, sagging down. The roof's all falling in. People all gone, just like the Scots. They moved to the cities to be stockpiled in the park. You have a little old place they live in that they're either paying rent on or paying the bank for, and they don't own it, and they don't have anything that's not in debt, and the borrower is servant to the lender. It's the law. They're slaves. Then, as I bring the land into desolation, then shall the land enjoy her Sabbath. As long as it lies desolate. Leviticus 26, 14 through 35. Now the punishment. Who gets these punishments? Well, the law is really quite specific on this. It's the people who break the law, they get the punishment, or the people who allow the law to be broken, they get the punishment. It really makes no difference. The people who break the law get the punishment, or the people who allow the law to be broken, they get the punishment. Well, let's look at that a little more carefully. Let's back that statement up. Because if you don't mind me saying so, I just said a mouthful. Because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I have appointed to utter destruction, therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people. 1 Kings 20:42. What's the penalty for murder? Premeditated murder. Death. We put them in prison, turn them loose in 5 years. Rape? What's the penalty for rape? Death. We put them in prison, they're out 6 months now. There's one fella who chopped off a woman's arms, like a girl's arms, and then raped her. They put him in prison for 20 years and turned him loose in 3, and he's walking the streets someplace down here in Florida, I understand. And what does the scripture say? Because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I have appointed to utter destruction, therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people. 1 Kings 20:42. And we wonder why our cities are vacant. We wonder why their crime is rampant. We wonder why our fields do not produce. We wonder why we are driven off the land. We wonder why God is doing these things. Because he has promised he would. The lawbreaker is punished, or the people who allow it to happen are punished. It's the law. A case in point. The Southland was wealthy. We had plantations, 1,000-acre plantations. We had farms. We had noble men, honorable men, brilliant men, men of letters, warriors, and we had beautiful women, cultured women, responsible women, women who could manage an entire plantation and take care of 100 slaves, capable women. We were God-fearing people. And then all of a sudden, we are inundated with armies, raping and murdering and killing and pillaging. And we sent our boys to the front. We sent them, every man that could go. South Carolina, 1 out of every 5 voters died. 9 out of 10 boys who marched away in 61 were dead in 65. The killing fields of Gettysburg, where tens of thousands of our bravest Virginians lay down, the farmers, the kings, the priests, shot down and died. Why? Why would God allow this to happen when all the right was on our side? Was all the right on our side? Let's look. We had wealthy priests living among us. Many of our priests were fat. I am sorry, I don't have time to go into this, but this I am going to develop later on tonight when we meet again. We, the Southland, sacrificed instead of obeying. Now, what does the law say? It is better to obey than to sacrifice. That is the law. And tonight, I'm going to say exactly which laws the South and South Africa and Germany and the United States and our people are breaking today, and what we're going to have to do about it to survive. Thank you.